just a beauty.
Here is one of the best punters in all the land, A.J. Cole, second in net punting.
Oh, man. Gilligan will punt. Gilligan does a terrific job. Dying at the 7.
Camardo boots it. Jake Camardo has been one of the best in the business this year in distance kicking.
We're out here at a field in the northern part of Atlanta, Georgia, doing something you would not expect your average YouTube punter to be doing.
I'm Coach Dawson Zimmerman, and I have the really privilege of coaching these guys over there, AJ Cole, Jake Camarda, Blake Gillikin. So I worked with one-on-one kicking, still do, running the Atlanta division with Coach Mike McCabe. And so those guys all are from Atlanta and kind of came through. I was probably 25, 26, and kind of had the great opportunity of working with them from sophomore / junior year, and then just kind of all the way up.
But you see almost like that pretty far. I'll pump this. And you come in on you. Gives you that great alignment. You can kind of see how on this one, you see how this one takes your hand.
Turning it a little bit.
Your hand's just moving down with the ball like a hair. This is the big difference with your technique, is that you've taken this step.
Yes. Go watch the film you posted to me a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And my knee was
forward.
Yeah, but you take the second.
Yeah, you were toeing. So what we're looking at is basically his first step. Blake has a tendency to get really forward and toey. And here, when we see this, it's money. It's gonna control your weight so well. I mean, look at it all the way through.
Man, it's so cool. I have so much respect for Dawson as the coach and as the person. When I was in high school, when I was first learning how to punt, Dawson was sort of just coming out of the NFL. He was kind of halfway. Am I gonna keep training? Am I not? And so he was sort of getting into the coaching thing. And I was playing basketball when I was learning how to punt my junior year. He was driving down to my high school, which is probably legit in traffic, 50 minutes to an hour from here. He was driving all the way down there, and he was kicking with me after my basketball practice on my high school field at 6 o'clock to 7. The lights, sun's going down, trying to turn on the lights, kicking in the dark. And I think I was paying him $50 or something like that. So after gas money, he's probably clearing $20 for hours of his time. I'll do anything that I can for him and to work with him. And those days were real cool because it was just me and him trying to figure it out. He was trying to figure out who he was as a coach and how to kind of relay the information he had in his head. And I was trying to figure out how to use my body.
I think you just stay up,
Stay.
feel loose with that arm.
Just stay.
Just stay.
AJ and I met, he was a sophomore in high school, and just a big Sasquatch guy. He was a good athlete, not a great punter. And so we went out and did a session, and he was okay. And then it wasn't until he went up to NC State and punted great, and they actually offered him. And so from then on out, we were just kind of training really consistently over the course of, year. Every other Sunday we would meet, we'd work, we'd kind of work on technique, and then really all the way up through college, and then obviously NFL stuff. He's just always been, I would say, the guy I've probably honestly worked with the most.
I'm gonna do it right now. That one it didn't move. Mm-hmm. The line.
And when I was in college, I was sort of only comparing myself and to the other guys that were there. I wasn't really kicking against the elite of the elite competition. I was actually just talking to Dawson about that. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made is I kind of picked the wrong lane to go down with my form a little bit. And so I had the technique that I was using. I was kind of like a jab 2 guy, and I was real rigid. I was dropping the ball real nose up. And if you watch any of my film from back then, the hips just stay so far behind. I'm just kicking this. It's just all quad. There's no triple extension of the hips. I'm not using my hand clean muscles.
A lot of the stuff technically for AJ, and he could definitely tell you this too, I think it's the same stuff that all punters battle, which is alignment and strides are essential. And so for AJ, I think it was pairing those two things up and then adding the component of not getting too far forward, having his drop just fall straight down, because it would end up with him crunching behind it. So really it was a matter of unlocking his hips through the ball was the single-handedly biggest difference maker for him, I think, because he could use his whole frame to come through instead of just kind of sitting behind it. And so I think that's for him technically drop, alignment, strides, and then feeling that like release up into the ball was kind of his like big thing.
It took me going down to Birmingham in between my senior season and pro day to really wake me up that I needed to change a lot of stuff and I needed to make some big improvements really. And I was down there with Ty Long and Ryan Santoso, who was punting at the same time, and I was going on the field with them every day, and I was just getting absolutely thrashed, just put in the blender and just like full ninja. And it took that for me to be like, all right, you know, we need like drastic changes, like we need a whole makeover. Like it's not, you know, a haircut's not gonna do, we need a total makeover. That was huge for me. I started doing the kickstart. I tried to get the nose flat, and I tried to just really be able to use like everything I have. For me, one of the biggest things you can do is just get around elite competition. I've always tried to do that. It just forces you to look in the mirror in a different way. If you're just kicking by yourself, you can kind of disillusion yourself to be like, oh, it was a good day, that wasn't that bad, that was whatever. When you're out there kicking with a Blake and with a Jake and kicking and you know, they're hitting these monster balls. If you're not stacking up against that, it's real obvious to everybody that's there, to yourself included.
Yeah, obviously we're reporting on Tuesday, so what is that? Today's Friday, 4 days. So like the season's here at this point, you're not making like wholesale changes. It's more about just like building confidence. Obviously being out here with like AJ and Jake, like two of the best, kind of measuring stick for yourself going into training camp.
I don't have to punch. Yeah, you're just gonna test the limit.
Blake, what's funny is Blake punts a lot like I did. That's definitely past tense, like the way that I used to. Blake is a little bit more like on his toe and honestly has the ability to kind of like bend his body underneath to catch a lot of balls. And so what I mean by that is he can, depending on the drop, can be a little bit different each time, but he's always able to match it on his foot. And so for Blake, really the big thing for him was he was always a huge strider. So when he was in high school, that was like our main focus, was like his drop has always been really good. And he like grinded, and still does, his drops, his like catch and mold, like drill work. It was the strides of not being, I think you did a video on this, the like first step, getting too bent and kind of like shooting him. That's always his thing, is if he can control the drop and then have good steps, he's like phenomenal. I mean, he's just like crazy talented in that way.
Gilligan does a terrific job, dying at the 7th.
I mean, honestly, I try to keep it simple, just try to turn the football over.
So Jake started working with when he was a freshman in high school. And the thing with Jake is that he, like you said, incredibly talented. Leg is, I mean, he's like a human whip. He's very much like probably a little bit more of like a feel punter in a lot of ways.
It's not really much more than that. I try not to make it too technical, just try to hit, you know, good footballs as often as I can.
And so for him, I think just kind of figuring out what his technique looks like for him, because he's a little bit more unconventional with how he kind of like dips down and comes back up. For him, it's just like, hey, the drop's always been kind of there and controlled. How is his body moving in relation to it, and what does that feel like? And so I think there's this like balance between, you want to be technical with guys, but you also want to say, hey, how did that feel? What'd you feel in that one? And so I think that for him, like, he's probably a little bit more towards, how'd you feel about this one? And then kind of correcting it, because he's just a great athlete.
I mean, it's a feel kind of thing, is literally like, you just got to feel it. Like, I could sit here and I could watch the tape all day and try to emulate what I look like on tape, but half the time when I try to emulate what I look like on tape, it actually looks different and I start feeling different things.
Jake's process going into the draft, I mean, he's always been someone who just kind of keeps doing what he's doing. He was punting great out of high school, so I think he was just trying to punt great into college. He did a lot of, and I can't really take credit for like preparing Jake. For him, again, it's like it's figuring out what that feel is, figuring out exactly how he needs to do for his technique. Because again, those guys, what's crazy is like, yeah, I worked with all of them, but like they all have different technique. For a day like today where they're just trying to tune up before the season, I think I know like kind of how they punt. And so I would say definitely the case with like AJ, trying to figure out, hey, what is it exactly that you're doing really well? And figuring out and honing in on what does that exact perfect form look like, so that you can kind of have, so he can have a baseline as he goes into the season to say, hey, this is where my technique is when it's working. And I think that knowledge is so important to me. Like from how I coach guys, it's like I want guys to understand what they're doing, so that way if they do find themselves, like any of us do, in a little bit of a rut where it just doesn't feel right, you have something to go back to.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the time of the year to put on the finishing touches to go into training camp. I'm not really a guy that says don't change anything during the season, because sometimes you need to change things, but I don't think you have complete changeover during the season. Like, you don't have a total makeover. And so I think for me, I kind of came out here with a real specific thing I wanted to talk to Dawson about. And we text all the time. I'll send him videos. I've been the guy prop my shoe up, got him on FaceTime and have him watch a couple punts and then FaceTime him and ask him what he thinks. But it's just different when you're out on the field with somebody. So I kind of wanted to talk to him about the way I got my elbow, my underhand grip versus overhand, keeping the nose flat, a couple different things like that. And I just kind of wanted to play it out. So first part of the day, we were just kind of working with that. I've always found that when I make any kind of changes or I'm thinking, my speed tends to go down. So first part of the day was sort of just messing around with it, and then the second part of the day is add the speed back. It's kind of like, I kind of compare it to when you're driving and they tell you when you change lanes, you're supposed to speed up into the next lane. I think punting is kind of like that. When you change something, you kind of got to speed up into the change, because what'll happen is you'll make a change and then you'll lose speed because you're thinking and you're trying to get it right, but you actually don't know if the change is working because you've got no pace and no tempo to you. So add the tempo back, and I feel like it went well, and I think it was good competition. It's good to kick with those two guys. They're obviously some of the best legs in the NFL. It's good just to kind of get out here and rip some balls.
Every punter by the highlights. I put Logan Cook in the middle. His were kind of disgusting. His were kind of
He's nasty.
Yeah, here's my. That's his form I like the best. No offense to you.
Dude, it's just like
You're kind of like giving me some anger.
it's just like so.
No, it's just so. It's like walk and punt.
You said something about him being like super underrated.
He punts like so apathetic. He just seems like
it's so good. It's just a human whip.
It has to be like where he plays though.
I don't know. I don't get.
Well, now they're starting to play on national television more, so
Yeah. Hopefully.
maybe people will be exposed to the legend.
Look how long that is, bro.
Here's what I would say.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're long. What do you think, AJ?
It looks like George holds on to it so long.
Do hold on to it really long.
So long, that's awesome.
Yeah, you have a great release through.
I could not even imagine dropping it that late.
I try to get
Hey,
like.
stop it when I release it.
That's really
Dawson,
late.
stop when I would
That's
release
so
it.
late. That's the latest I've ever seen.
I think the main thing, like, so.
I released it there.
Do you see how I think on this one, your arm's a little bit tucked.
Yeah.
I think if you were to extend it like 2 centimeters,
That's it.
I think that you wouldn't need to impart this extra kind of push into it.
Yeah.
So but dude, your form's great, man.
I'm just like digging a little bit. If you felt like you were walking a little bit more, like walking the door foot first, I feel like you could glide a little bit into that, because you're kind of putting yourself in this position and then sort of jumping there. But if you ended up, instead of this position, if you went into this position, like one thing that I think that helps me is I get here, the foot comes through and everything stays the same. And I land it real flat. You kind of come here and come up there, and then you have to like jump a little bit. So you kind of lose a little bit of power down.
Yeah. I should just kind of glide to it.
Yeah, like one thing I think about when I'm punting is I think about trying to walk on water. Like if I could walk on water, how would I do it?
Okay, Jesus.
I would just like.
Wow.
Final closing thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I would say to the majority of people out there, one of the things that I end up having to do a lot of times is I'll talk to like high school or college kids, and they're like, ask the question you just did, like, oh, like, how'd you get better? What do you work on? All that stuff. And the 2 things I tell them is, number 1, you can't get around good punters enough. Any opportunity you have, I don't care if you got to go live in Alaska, whatever you got to do, like you have to get around good quality competition, because there's just no other way to get better. I firmly believe that. Maybe that doesn't work for everyone, but I don't really know who's the exception. And then thing number 2 is, if you're not getting better, you're probably just not doing enough. You're probably not doing enough drops, you're probably not working enough in the weight room, you're probably not taking care of your body. I talk to some like high school kids who are 16, 17, and they're like, oh, I only kick 2 times a week because I'm like really concerned about like over kicking. I'm like, dude, you have a rubber band at 16, you can't kick enough. There's no such thing as over kicking for you. And as you get older, over kicking becomes a thing, but I really think it's just under recovering probably. So taking care of your body is critical. But yeah, if you're 17 years old and you're worried about over kicking, like relax. Like you have to kick until you get good at it. Like what happens? Like okay, I didn't over kick. I kicked twice a week, and then I didn't get the scholarship offer because I did never figure out how to punt. Like you just need to go kick more. Like I kicked every single day. You just have to do it until you get good at it. And yeah, I think punting is incredible. It's fun. It's a lot harder than people realize. I think that the camera angles of like NFL Sunday don't really do punting justice. Like when you're on a field like this, you get to see how cool it is. Like the trajectory of the ball. I mean, it's like the home run derby. People love the home run derby. It's moonshots, and that's what spiral punting is. And it's just, I mean, the balls are just flying out here. It's so cool. And you know, on the NFL Sunday, they show the little picture, and then they just like zips downfield, and the returner's just waiting. But if they could really capture how cool it is, I think people would think punting is cooler than it is, because it actually is awesome. Like I think that it's a cool skill. It's more difficult than most people think. It's kind of contradictory. You have to be, you know, short but powerful. You have to be, you know, quick with your hands but slow with your mechanics. And yeah, I think it's a really cool skill, and I have a lot of fun talking about it, thinking about it, working on it, coaching it, and doing the whole thing.
Get over. No!